Good morning, South Asia. So today we are going to have a discussion on the future of Bangladesh in the Colombo Institute for Human Sciences platform. Before that, I will introduce what Colombo Institute for Human Sciences is with a brief history. Initially, Colombo Institute was established in 2009 and it launched the South Asia Journal for Culture, which is now published by SAGE as Society and Culture in South Asia. And it also launched two other journals for Sri Lankan readership in Sinhala and Tamil. Colombo Institute was re-established in 2024 with a group of new directors and new ideas. Our mission is to create a space to bring about intellectual rigor and innovative thinking to socio-cultural knowledge production in Sri Lanka through a holistic approach. So Colombo Institute also has a significant interest in research and work across South Asia. Today, the discussion will be moderated by Zunaid Ahmed Eshan, who is a PhD candidate in anthropology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His research focuses on the intersection of religion and left politics in South Asia. Coming from Bangladesh, he is a recipient of the Venegrand Wordsworth International Fellowship. Without further ado, we can start the conversation. Sunay, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone in South Asia and a late night for those of us in other parts of the world. Thank you Colombo Institute for Human Sciences and Professor Sasank Pera for giving me the opportunity to moderate this exciting session. I would like also to thank Anushka and Aruna for organizing this event. My special thanks to our esteemed panelists, Dr. Aditya Nigam and Sultan Muhammad Zakaria for joining us on a very short notice. I would like to introduce the panelists briefly at this moment. Professor Aditya Nigam is a political theorist formerly associated with the Center for the Study of Developing Societies. His recent work has been concerned with the decolonization of social and political theory. He has earlier worked on ideological and discursive formations and their relationship to the constitution of political subjectivities. He comments regularly on contemporary political issues on the blog kafila.online. He is the author of the Insurrection of Little Selves, The Crisis of Secular Nationalism in India, Power and Contestation, India since 1989, After Utopia, Modernity, Secularism, and the Post-Colony, Desired Named Development, and Decolonizing Theory, Thinking Across Traditions. Our second panelist today, Sultan Muhammad Zakaria, is the co-founder of Bangladeshi Diaspora for Justice and Accountability and former South Asia researcher for Amnesty International. He is currently a doctoral researcher in the Department of Educational Policy Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His research interest lies in the intersection of education, democracy, and human rights. He was a former fellow at Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. Dr. Aditya Nigam and Sultan Muhammad Zakaria, a warm welcome to the session on behalf of the Colombo Institute for Social Sciences.
Thank you, and a warm thank you to all of you and to the Colombo Institute from my side. It's such a lovely occasion to be sharing this across South Asian countries or people. That's very nice. Thank you.
Okay. To initiate today's discussion, I would like to give a brief overview of what has been happening in Bangladesh since last month. In recent weeks, the people of Bangladesh faced widespread atrocities under Sheikh Hasina's autocratic regime. While Hasina's rule has been the cause for simmering discontent for some time now, with the last 3 elections conducted unfairly, among other issues including serious human rights violations, the recent violent crackdown on students protesting for reforms to the quota system in government jobs sparked civil unrest across the nation. The reported death toll exceeded 400, with thousands injured and nearly 10,000 arbitrarily detained. According to an investigation by Daily Prothomalo, 75% of those killed were young adults, teenagers, and children, including at least 45 students from various universities, colleges, and schools. Lethal weapons were used against the unarmed protesters, with many shot at point-blank range. On July 18, the government enforced a complete internet shutdown, creating an information blackout for 11 days. A nationwide curfew, along with a shoot-at-sight order, was enacted on July 19th. However, all these violent atrocities could not suppress the demonstrators. From July 29, the call for Hasina's resignation increased, which led to a mass uprising against 15-year dictatorship in Bangladesh. Nearly 100 people were killed during the protest on August 4th. On August 5th, the protesters marched to Ganabhavan, which is Sheikh Hasina's place. Understanding the situation is out of control, Hasina resigned and fled to India. My first question to the panelist would be, why and how did the quota reform movement turn into a nationwide mass unrest against Hasina's dictatorship? I guess Dr. Aditya can start, and then we'll move to Zakaria Bhai.
So thank you again for this opportunity to talk about something which I've been feeling very intensely about and trying to follow. My own sense of this, because I've actually tried to follow many mass movements over the last couple of decades. This kind of rapid transformation of a movement from a single issue to a political demand is very rare. It doesn't usually happen like that. And it has to usually happen not because of any single grievance. It's not that quota reform is the only thing that actually led to this demand. In fact, whenever there are such kind of situations, where what would look like an immediate demand of which has to do with jobs and access to education and other things, that suddenly transforms into a political movement because there is an accumulation of conflicts and contradictions and so on. So it is something which was obviously simmering below the surface. And since I have been in touch with many friends in Bangladesh over this period, I was actually getting a sense that there is something going to happen. It was almost like the way many of them were beginning to talk about it was that it was something very big is going to happen once the quota movement, especially after the 14th or 15th, when that Rajakar and Nathbuti statement was made, that that if freedom fighters don't have jobs, who will have the grandchildren of the Rajakar. Now that, I think, was the point of escalation, and then many things started falling into place. So the accumulation of the democratic aspirations over like 3 rigged or stolen elections was, I think, one fundamental question. But the other part related to, no, it's not but, it's the other part which is actually related to it, in my opinion, is the fact that there were no judicial processes. I mean, the kind of thing that has been happening with the disappearances is what happens in high conflict zones, right? Where it's almost like a war situation. In civilian contexts, you arrest people, you take them to court, you have a case, even though we know from India that many of these are framed cases and framed trials. But at least you have to produce the person in court. Here, there's no sign of people. So the people for 10 years have not seen the sun. When it's only after she goes and this Ainaghar is, people are released from there, that is when people come to know the extent of it. So anyway, I'll hand over to Sultan.
Sure. Thank you first of all. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to join with such distinguished panels. If you ask me, I would say at least, I mean, I was trying to jot down my ideas. Four triggers, four key triggers. Of course, the first and foremost is it's about the job quota and reforms in the public service recruitment. I mean, what we see at the surface. Um, uh, and the students had another round of protest in 2018 for the same cause. So apparently, it appears that the students' outburst was caused by this particular anti-discrimination recruitment policies. So that's, I would say, the prima facie uh, uh, evidence or the arguments for this case. But I think more underlying causes, as Aditya was trying to mention, in my view, I categorized it the three distinct pillars of this crisis. One is that the population has been disenfranchised for the last 10 years. Last three elections was completely sham. Minimal participation, sometimes outright rigging and blatantly lying about the rigging, using and abusing the system to snatch the elections. So people could not vote for the last three elections properly. And there was a deep sense of disenfranchisement that my right to vote has been taken away. And which is like the umbilical cord between the citizens and the state, right? Someone is governing me, but without my consent. So that anger has been brewing for some time. And the second is the complete laws of the jungle, lawlessness. There is absolutely dismal state of rule of law, uh, which starts with like the chronic capitalism to favoritism to all sorts of malaise that comes with this completely lack of rule of law scenarios. And the ruling party affiliated student wing, then cadets, they oftentimes attack with impunity. They control the public university, like they use the public universities for their rent seeking opportunities. And the country observed some very disturbing trends over the last 10 to 15 years. As you all know, that more than 3,000 people have been extrajudicially executed, and many of them are simply for speaking against the regime. Nearly 1,000 people have been forcibly disappeared. And these two trends are very disturbing, because Bangladesh in its entire history, it never witnessed a moment where enforced disappearance have been systematic. There were cases randomly here and there, but the systematic nature, the state deliberately targeting its citizens and forcibly disappear them without any trace. That's absolutely shocking to people. And hundreds of people have been disappeared. So this completely up the ante. I mean, people were angry, but they could not speak. And that's where another dimension of lawlessness is, that the choking the dissent voices, using Digital Security Act, now Cyber Security Acts, all sorts of legal and extrajudicial, extra-legal measures to curtail freedom of speech, freedom of assembly and associations, and all with impunity. I mean, every worst thing that you can do in a dictatorship that people observed in Bangladesh in the last 10 years, in terms of lack of rule of law. So that's the second pillar. I think that people had been totally pissed off, but they could not speak up because there are repercussions if someone speaks up. We have cases of even the minors have been picked up just posting a benign a Facebook post on the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister. So the regime gave abundant signals to people that, look, we do not tolerate this. So don't criticize us. And it created a climate of fear, and the whole environment was completely like, I cannot explain how people felt. And then the third, I think, key reasons, which also I think plays as a multiplier effect, because many dictators in the history of mankind across the countries and continent actually thrive because of their economy. Like Middle Eastern dictators, they can provide the services because of the petrodollar and etc. So they can appease a large section of the population using their abundant resources, and they create the client base and etc. So I think for significant part of Sheikh Hasina's regime, I think a global economy and the way she extracted resources from within and outside facilitated the semblance of economic growth. But the hindsight is, I mean, the underlying scenario is she borrowed more money from external sources in the last 7 years, 8 years than all the government combined in the last 60 years. So it's a mindless borrowing and then plundering all of these resources. And that gave like some sort of economic growth, normalcy in the life of the, I mean, that certainly improved the life of people. But what happened in the last 2-3 years after COVID and then Ukraine war and etc., all those economic growth dividend completely wiped out. Inflation skyrocketed. Private sector investment was almost dried up, and then every economic malaise, every economic ills that was accumulated through the malgovernance actually came back to haunt them. The massive industrial scale of looting, plundering, ship opening of billions of dollars to external offshore accounts. So everything came back to haunt them. And the last 2-3 years, I would say it was very bad economically, both for the regime and for the people. So combination of all of these factors, I think it created a situation. The explosion was a matter of time. And this quota reform movement was just a trigger. And Sheikh Hasina, her regime, they thought that like they crushed every movement in the last 10 years. They called their reservists, like the Chhatra League group that usually go and discipline these protesters. Right, this unlawful, unlawful way. Of course, they are protected by the law enforcement agencies, but they attack and disperse the protesters. So that's Sheikh Hasina's first line of the defense that worked for the last 10 years. But this time, when she sent Chhatra League to disperse them, And an amazing, extraordinary thing happened. Within the 24 hours, the students across all public universities, they mobilized themselves and they drove out Chhatru League from the public university campuses. So that's the first time her first line of the defense failed. And then she called the second line of defense, which is like unleashing the RAB, police, BGB, all this law enforcement apparatus. And they started killing people like they did in the last 10 years and got away with it. In my lifetime, I have never seen police indiscriminately shooting protesters the way police shot at protesters during Sheikh Hasina's entire regime. So they made it a new normal. And this time also they started when the first line of defense collapsed, Chhatru League failed, she called the police and all these law enforcement agencies, and they started killing people. The second day, they killed 6 people, starting with Abu Said. That was still manageable because students still demanding quota reform. But then when the killing spree started, it's a very violent cyclical. I would say that it created a ripple effect. Blood begetted blood. So lots of people started dying. Police killed in the first 24 to 48 hours, almost like 256 or 66 people, young men and women. And I think worse is the way police killed, killing protesters who are unarmed, who are trying to just move away from the street, shooting at point blank range, students hiding um, uh, in a high-rise building. He was trying to flee from the scene, and they chased him to the edge of the building, the carnage, and they shot him multiple times. So it was like a massacre on camera. Hundreds of video footage started emerging that how brutally police massacred people. And then triggered the entire country, and that went out of control. Everybody was shocked. It cannot happen. We are the brothers and sisters in the same country. You are not an occupying force. The way she unleashed violence in the first 48 hours of this brutality, I think that's when she sealed her fate. A section of army initially initially joined this killing spree. They shot at protesters, but immediately after the first 48 hours, there is a huge pressure built on army, both from our side, diaspora side. We engaged UN peacekeeping mission, and etc. because UN vehicle was used in suppressing the protesters. So everyone from outside and inside created a huge pressure on army. And army felt the pressure because they were losing trust and confidence of the people. And I think then army chief called up all of his senior officers just to discuss what should we do. Everyone almost unanimously said that we should never shoot at people, protesters. And I think the moment army decided that no, we are not going to engage, we will be just a spectator, I think that's when the game was all over for Sheikh Hasina. Because people defied curfew, nothing could have stopped them because the brutality and the nature of violence angered everyone. I think these are some of the key reasons that Sheikh Hasina. One is that the compounding crisis. Another was her last-minute crimes. The way she brutalized these law enforcement officers and everything, she killed people. It's unbelievable, and we still cannot believe that she could do this to her own people. I will stop this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aditya and Jakaria Bhai. It was really that like very nuanced understanding of the movement, how it started and that like how it ended. So now, as you are talking about the violence, the nature of the violence. So my second question is directed to the nature of violence in this movement, to have a much deeper theoretical understanding of it. So if we look at the nature of the violence done by Sheikh Hasina's regime, it's simply shocking. You mentioned that we have a lot of video footage where we can see security forces are shooting people from point blank range. Forces are shooting people, including children, when they are trying to flee. In some cases, we have seen that like 5 to 10 bullets or even more were used to kill a single person. Helicopters were used to shoot the protesters, which killed people even on their rooftops or balconies. Uh, Political theorist Irfan Ahmed observes, I quote, clearly the death toll is much higher, making it analogous to the 1999 Jallianwala Bagh massacre carried out by the notorious General Dyer in Amritsar. The point is not about the statistics, rather it is about the sheer brutality with which the young students, including children as young as 6 or 7, were put to death. An image that typifies the state terror is the one in which the shameless Bangladeshi police parade the body of a killed student and then, from atop its vehicle, mercilessly dump it on the street. The killed and dead bodies have no less dignity than the living ones. End quote. The kind of violence and sheer brutality can only occur if there is a systematic process of dehumanization or ideological indoctrination that justifies atrocities against victims. I would like to ask the question for both. What do you think of this nature of violence that occurred in Bangladesh recently? Have you observed any dehumanizing tactics or narratives by the ruling Awami League which try to morally justify the violent atrocities? Dr. Nigam, you can start.
Actually, much of what Sultan said in response to the first question, I think is also about the nature of violence. It's something very brutal in the sense that I have, in our 60s, in the 1960s and 70s, we used to hear of police firing. In India, Asia, generally in Latin America. But in the last 15-20 years, there has been some kind of restraint on this because of various international conventions and things like that. There are rubber bullets, there is water cannons and so on. You don't do this kind of firing which happened from practically the day after, so 16th, the day when the actual police firing began. And it was all like point blank range. You look at Abu Said's video, I mean, I'm just stunned. Here is this man standing like unarmed and you're shooting. This is completely unimaginable. And it's not one or two, because this goes on and on till about
August
so
5.
yes, and no, actually so after the internet shutdown, when we got the figures after that from some friends, so the official figure at that time was 209 or something, but even at that point, AFP had reported something like 1100 killed. So, and then apart from that, the various disappearances and so on. The other shocking thing which he was mentioning, this, or you were also mentioning, the killing from helicopters or snipers in high-rise buildings. There's a child sitting inside her house and she gets killed. There is a girl playing on the terrace of her house and she gets killed. Oh, 6-7-year-old people. I mean, what kind of madness is this? So I think that kind of violence I haven't seen or heard of it in recent years. This was something very common during the 60s and 70s. But I think Sultan's thing was right, that this regime made it into a kind of almost dealt with its people like an occupying force. And so, in fact, I think this thing, coupled with the fact that there was there had been no safety valve of the elections, also it was to blow up. But this the question of violence, and that was what was also quite interesting for me to see as an outsider, that after after internet was restored and gradually people started coming back, as the news of violence and so on spread and people started protesting, the demand shifted from quota reform to resignation. So, but it was absolutely, I think that is where they also realized that this is not going to work, because the suppression didn't happen. I think people decided to just come out despite the direct firings, killings, and so on. It only started growing after that, rather than get suppressed as in earlier times. So you're right. But yes, as far as the question of violence is concerned, I don't see what justification you can give for it. The only justifications you can give are when there is some kind of war between two different entities situation, between states or whatever, then you may try to give some kind of justification. I don't think there's any justification for any war in any situation, but you can make those kind of arguments in that. You don't make it when there are unarmed protesters against your own citizenry.
Yeah. I'd like to divide the response in two part. So the first part is I'd like just to add with what Dr. Aditya said. I actually looked at the Amritsar massacre. The casualty figure, the death figure is around 200 to 300 and 350. And I saw the British brutality did it across 300, 200 years, and then Pakistan period and this and that, and the Bangladesh period. And I make an argument that except 71, which is effectively in war, except 71, even the occupying forces, including British and the Pakistani, never killed that many people in just span of 2 weeks. So we are talking about right now more than 1,000 dead young men and women. And as I mentioned, some of the killings, even Israelis don't kill the Palestinian this way sometimes. A injured man, so he was shot, and his friend was rescuing him from the street. And then police again come closer and shot another couple of rounds. That the man was being dragged to sidewalk, and they just shot him and killed him. This is absolutely horrendous. And after what I saw, I decided that these things, even if Sheikh Hasina survives, we will take her to ICC, no matter what. So we initiated a process of ICC communication. We mobilized a team. We are working with the human rights groups, law firms, and etc. But the good thing is that the change in government happened in Dhaka, so we'll have to step back and see, give them a chance what they can do, because that's a requirement of the Rome Statute, that the state party has to be unwilling or unable to prosecute the crime or investigate the crime. So now we have to give the new administration a chance. Regarding the second part of the question, the justification, I think Sheikh Hasina and her regime actually tried to rally a very minor, very fringe group of people along the so-called liberation war and anti-liberation war, which is completely absurd after 70 years of the war. The dynamics has changed. The enemy of 1971 and the enemy of the country in 2024 has completely changed. But she continuously abused this 1971 narrative, and a very small section. I don't want to say it's more than 1% or 2%, but it's 1% or 2% of the people in 180 million people. There's a lot of people. So a lot of people has been beneficiary of these fake, faulty narratives, but she was able to mobilize this group and rally this cause, greater cause, the 71 cause, and dividing anti-liberation force. Actually, she used this to justify brutally suppressing Jamaat Islami for the last 15 years of her rule. She used the same to brutally suppress the main opposition BNP. So yes, she used some sort of, some sort of narratives and historical. She tried to trigger those historical trauma of some people because 71 affected a lot of people, right? And she abused that to consolidate her reign. Even in the latest case, what we witnessed in the last 2-3 weeks, the thing actually started with her very loose remarks that these are sons of the collaborators. So she again tried to abuse the same dichotomy that the against liberation war and pro-liberation war. But people are already fed up for a number of reasons that we discussed in the first question. So this time when Sheikh Hasina called the students who are protesting the quota for the liberation of the heirs of the liberation war, they first broke out, and they at midnight they started chanting and protesting that yes, we all are rajakas. We all are collaborators. So that break loose the entire her narrative that people can be now cowed because that you are anti-liberation force or pro-liberation force. I think she tried to abuse that, she tried to use that, but it didn't work this time. And as Aditya said, there is no justification. There is no justification. There cannot be any justification of such mindless killing of your own population. So no matter how she tried to rally, use the historical trauma or some sort of the historical facts cause, nothing can justify killing of even single innocent man and woman. But she did it. She like carried out a brutal massacre.
Yeah, thanks again. I just I asked the question because that there was a kind of reported events where Awami League leaders was saying even into the international media that these are the terrorists are trying to destabilize the government. That kind of narration they were trying to sell on the media. Even some media that the national media also reported. Similarly, some Indian media also that tried to portray it's a kind of Islamist uprising are happening. So that's something that to an
Yeah,
extent,
John
yeah,
and I,
yeah.
yeah, this is an interesting framing, and I would like to mention that the West was complicit in the first half of her 10 years dictatorship rule. I saved the first 5 years because she was elected and then she abused it. Because the Sheikh Hasina played this so-called the Islamic terrorism card. and she played it well. I personally know, I personally worked with the Western diplomats in Dhaka and outside, and I know for firsthand how they feel about this, that the rise of so-called Islamic terrorism and this and that. So she capably, I mean, she very aptly used that this framing, but what she didn't appreciate that the geopolitics has changed. Uh, the West, I mean, a significant part out of the Western capitals that use this Islamic terrorism for their own geopolitical mantra, and etc. I'm not dismissing the existence of this crime, but I'm saying that the way they used it since 2001 aggressively, uh, they changed their geopolitical narratives and direction after, I would say, Americans uh, shifted their focus on China, because until Americans were, they didn't have any enemy since 1991, right? So they needed to invent something to keep their military machines going. And Islamic terrorism played a good part of it. I mean, that fueled and that helped the U.S. military-industrial complex in engaging wars that was unnecessary completely, and that actually depleted American resources. So that military-industrial machine, they needed a new cause, and the China and Russia provided a perfect pretext. But they cannot have a multi-pronged uh, fight, right? So they gave up the Islamic terrorism. Their focus on this so-called Islamic fighting the war on terror, that is completely dead by, I think, by the year 2015 or 16. To Americans completely, I would say, gave it up. And their approach to the Muslim world, because they know that they need a partner in the Muslim world to fight their new uh, enemies, so-called the Chinese and the Russians. So Sheikh Hasina did not see the change in the current, the change, because the Western capitals lost interest in that framing, because that was not serving them anymore. But Sheikh Hasina did not notice that. She continues to use that, and she thought that, okay, I can still play that card. But that didn't work.
Yeah, that's actually lead to our third question, that coming to the India media discourse regarding the movement, as many believe that Hasina's fascism was backed by India. Many Awami League top leadership reportedly told that they would be in power as New Delhi is with them. There is strong evidences which suggest India's direct interference in the last three farcical elections. However, within hours of Sheikh Hasina's removal from power after the student-led mass uprising, reports began to appear in some Indian media outlets that members of Hindu minorities in Bangladesh were being targeted by Islamist forces. And even more bizarre, the Times of India article stated that Jamaat-e-Islami, Bangladesh's biggest Islamist party, brought down Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh. Senior BJP leader Suvendu Adhikari claims Hindus are being slaughtered in Bangladesh. If the situation in Bangladesh is not brought under control in the next few days, then the people of Bengal should be ready to accept more than 1 crore refugees, just like 1947 or the 1971 Liberation War. My question to both of you, what are the ground realities in Bangladesh regarding minorities? Do you think India is initiating a propaganda war? If so, why? You need to unmute.
Yeah, two things. One about the Indian media and the situation here. That I will come to first, because from the moment the movement started gathering steam, in a very strange way, within certain sections of the, even on the social media, on social media, a lot of opinions started coming already about Islamic takeover, this, that. It was like almost that I even saw a couple of videos of completely doubtful provenance or veracity, where they're coming from, of some mullah marching, demanding the kingdom of Allah and something. I didn't know where these were coming from. To be frank, that was only one video, but these things started coming, and from a large section, not so. My hunch is two things. One, it was immediately the line of the Indian government and the security establishment. So they, from the very beginning, were kind of trying to see this as a Pakistan-China sponsored thing. Now, this is the problem, which I think most people who comment, who write, have also become. They start thinking like the state. They start thinking as if people have no understanding or agency of their own. Every movement is there because somebody is using them. Some nation, some big nation state, some big force, evil force is using them and so on. But so that was one kind of thing which started happening from the Indian establishment. What was even more worrying was the secular / radical kind of secular left kind of people, especially in Bengal, who I think have got used to seeing Bangladesh as some kind of a backwater of Islamism and whatever. And there was like a kind of happy belief that there is a secular regime as long as Awami League is there. Everybody else is going to be just Islamist and so on and so forth. So it was a peculiar conjunction of these two. And then when Sheikh Hasina finally fled, by that time the BJP machinery also got into action, their IT cell, their machinery, etc., about all these attacks on Hindus. Now, from my information, two things are there. That first, on the very first day, some attacks spontaneously took place, perhaps spontaneously, but in one case, I have also heard of two Awami League local leaders being arrested for it eventually for attacks on Hindus. So it is not very clear that it was all entirely spontaneous. But as Shakawat Hussain, now the advisor on the Home Ministry, or whatever it is called, the Swarashtra doctor. What he said is that, look, there is actually a period when there was after she suddenly fled, there was a collapse of there was no administration. Basically, students were trying to immediately move in and keep order. And they were the people who were doing all this vigils about dacoits, and so on, and also any kind of law and order problem, including the attacks on minorities. Now, on that, there was, from what I have figured out, actually in many places, the local population, the local students, they were guarding Hindu or minority religious institutions. But in some places, and this is again, I'm referring to an interview of Shakawat Hussain's, that in many places it is happening, it did happen because there was a gap of 4 or 5 days when there was no administration, when the interim government had also not been formed. So the old government has gone, the new has not come in. And to make matters worse, what has happened is, and he put it very starkly, he said the people who should have been responsible for the situation, they have fled. Now the police has to face the music who was actually carrying out their orders. And what has probably happened is that a lot of retributive killings or some retributive killings of policemen has happened, because of which now the policemen are afraid to come out and perform their role of law and order and so on. So I guess yesterday an ultimatum was issued also that if they don't join duty within so and so days, then that would be taken as an index of the fact that they don't want to continue in their job. But the point is that the role of the police was, of course, very brutal. But I think the point that Shakawat Hussain was making was that there has to be a legal process in bringing them to book rather than individualized revenge and legal killing. So whatever it is, but because of that, there is probably a little bit of this element. Again, today I was reading of some reports where indications of Awami League people doing this in order to show that there has been that the minorities are under threat, that has also come to light in a number of places. So my feeling here is that playing up this kind of thing, assuming it is happening, I mean, the official sources are acknowledging that there has been this period of flux. There has been this period when there is no administration, there's no government, and that has been taken advantage of. Now, if you're able to understand that and not add fuel to fire, things can be controlled. But I think what has been done very irresponsibly, both by the Indian right and sections of the Indian left, is that they have played into this game and they are just continuously venting about what is going on and some kind of Islamic, is this some kind of Islamic takeover? Why are Hindus under attack and so on and so forth? And I think that is completely counterproductive. It is not something which is going to help the situation either in Bangladesh or even in India. I mean, if this kind of hysteria is whipped up, do you think West Bengal is going to be free of it? What Subhendu Adhikari is doing is actually playing with fire, the BJP leaders in Bengal. But are the left in Bengal able to tackle that? No, because they are themselves partaking of that net. They may not be doing it in the same scale, but they are not actually able to even understand what's going on, what is new and what's going on in Bangladesh.
That's true. So I had after this thing broke out, I have been engaged in Twitter, social media, and I spoke to about a dozen Indian TV channels over the last week or so. And I witnessed firsthand how they actually acted and how they used or abused the incidents to flame the fire. And a lot of their, I would say, a lot of them mischaracterized the whole scenario. And I have a lengthy to tweet that what Indian media and my India counterparts actually got wrong. First of all, they exhibited either naively or disingenuously that they completely failed to understand Bangladesh. That's my first observation. Every Indian media I attended, from NDTV to India Today, all the channels for the last week, their line of questioning and their arguments are so off the reality, ground reality. It was completely a surprise. It surprised me that how come that they are. I mean, we belong to the almost like we are surrounded, we are enveloped by media. And I expected more awareness, more knowledge and understanding of the country than they exhibited to me. That could be, I mean, I'm not saying they don't know. They could possibly know. Probably they try to do something else. Probably that's their agenda. That's part of their agenda. a couple of Indian channels before interviewing me. Before the interview started, they requested me that I shouldn't say anything anti-Indian. So that's really hilarious. I mean, that's funny in one aspect, but also how media is being co-opted. Media's role is not to police what thought should come in or out. Media's role is to just listen to the views, allowing their viewers, allowing their listeners to understand the perspectives. So I I classify their reaction um, of these minority attacks and these narratives in two ways. First of all, uh, definitely some attacks have happened. First group of people who have been victims are faced completely retributory attack. These are complete retribution, and these are the Awami League people who are affiliated with the Awami League. And I told my Indian counterparts, regardless of their ethnic, religious identity, these are Awami League cadres. They brutalized people, they suppressed people, oppressed people for the last 15 years. No matter what, we do not support this, we do not condone this. But that's the fact that these people run the reign of terror on their own people for the last 15 years. And there are some retributions. And that retributions happen overwhelming. If you code all these incidents, you will see overwhelmingly more than 95% of the people that of these attacks are Muslims, Awami League. But no one is saying that the Muslims are attacking Muslims, but the 5% or less people who are affiliated with the Awami Leagues. So we have to be cautious about that. Okay, these people are not attacked because they're Hindus, because of the Christians, because of their Muslims, because of their ethnic or religious identity, but because of their role in the past crimes. Again, we do not condone any violence, and we want this to be completely zero. No one should take the law in their own hands. But this is the society, this is the part of the world we live in, right? And people will take a farm sometimes, take a justice in their own hands when they see that they have been deprived of justice systematically for years and years and years. You see, almost 95% of the police station in Bangladesh were burned down. This is not an attack on Hindus. This is not an attack on Muslims, because police brutally suppressed people. Police completely led this terrorist Sheikh Hasina regime for the last 15 years. And all the angers were directed to police stations and police. And more than 90% of the people, Bangladesh was totally unguarded for 1 week. There was no police. All the stations, all the police outposts completely shut down. The officers fled. The Jawans didn't join. That the whole country was unguarded for a week. So all these attacks, because people have been fed up, people have been abused for far long and enough. So in that vein, some minority folks who are affiliated with this Awami League crime have came under attack. That's one group of people. Another group of a small portion of minorities have been attacked because across all South Asian countries, there are fanatics people, right? In India, there are Hindu fanatics. In Sri Lanka, there are Buddhist fanatics. Some of them, they took advantage of the situation. They are very minor, they are very few, they're very randomly happened, but that have happened, right? The third groups of attacks, I would say, is sabotage. And we know, as you mentioned, Mr. Aditya, that Awami League, because they because they're out of power. They wanted to create a chaos. They paid their people that create this chaos. And unfortunately, the Indian regime and the BJP Hindutva gang, I mean, it serves both of their interest. That if they propagate that Hindus are being attacked in Bangladesh, that gives them certain legitimacy of the savior of Hindus, whether it is true or not. So a third group is a systematic sabotage, I would say. I mean, of course, I'm not definite of that happened, but some people have been arrested. They confessed in front of media that yes, they have been hired by Awami League goons to vandalize places of worship, to attack Hindu places. So these three different groups of people who have been victims of the attacks. Broadly, what I'd like to say that finally that as a social science researcher, right, as a social scientist, you cannot rule out the occurrence of random incidents. It can happen. But what is more concerning that if it crossed the threshold of systematic attacks, if it's systematic, then we call it out. Yes, state has to, of course, state has the responsibility to even stop the random incidents. But there will be incidents no matter how hard, how effectively police and administration try. But what is more what is more aggravating is that if there are systematic attacks, there are systematic violence against minorities in Hindus in Bangladesh. And if you ask me, studying all the evidences or on knowing all the evidences, I can categorically deny that no, there were not systematic attacks. No one was targeting minorities in Bangladesh. No one has any interest to attack Hindus and drive them out of country in Bangladesh. Even you see Jamaat, the Islamic party, their student wings, they came up, they had to come up and say that, look, stop this. And their students wing guarded places of worship. Hafazat, which is like alternate, I mean, and another Islamist groups, they use their Friday sermons, they mobilize their own troops. All these radical groups, they guarded the places of worships of the minority. So that denies categorically that, look, this is not a systematic attacks. These are attacks because of X, Y, and Z that I laid it out. Again, no, we should not welcome, we should not expect even a single attack, but this is an interesting part of the world we live in. We could not have a very high civility, I mean, polity, highly educated and civil polity who would be respectfully and peacefully coexist with each other. And we had a history of communal violence for historical reasons or whatever. So I would like to stop here and see if I think some people have raised their hands and
I'll just
see.
yeah, before going to the question and answer, I had a lot of other questions, but as we are kind of out of time, so the last question also we could have avoided, but as the title says, future of Bangladesh, so the last question I will have to ask, but very briefly, maybe that like you can answer that in 1 minute. I know that like in 1 minute it cannot be answered, but it's still that like to justify the title, I will have to ask this question that like, what is the future? What is the next? We know that like Dr. Yunus took the interim government. Took the leadership in the interim government, and also that like in the movement, some says that like this was not a movement only to overthrow Hasina's fascism, but to initiate a reform of the state. So very briefly, if you can address the question, what comes next, and in what ways do you think the present state can be reformed or should be reformed? We will start with Dr. Aditya.
Now, actually, this is a a very big question, really. But let me say one thing that what is striking about this whole situation in Bangladesh presently is that if you compare it to, let us say, Egypt or Sri Lanka, I believe, power was almost lying on the streets and nobody was coming to pick it up. There were like days when that situation was there, and finally the old forces moved in and there was actually no change, despite such a massive mass movement. What has happened in Bangladesh is actually quite amazing. When the quota movement started, nobody knew that it would end up with the overthrow of Sheikh Hasina. But this larger civil society of Bangladesh was able to move in, to step out, to plan out a transition, that there should be an interim government. Now, this thing about state reforms has been discussed, apparently, and that is also an important part of what would broadly call Bangladesh civil society, the intellectuals, the teachers, the critical intelligentsia, that they have had some sense of how the state has to be reformed, what kind of reform is necessary. And when it looked like there might actually be a situation when this regime will fall, at that point, I know University Teachers Network and Anu Muhammad and all actually gave out a whole transition plan, right? And they did a press conference just day before the Sheikh Hasina fled. And then there has been, with the students, they have been continuously in conversation and so on. So the idea of a interim government to be immediately followed by, so that is also interesting. The first meeting, the army did not call the student representatives. Student representatives were very, very clear that they decided to keep their presence on the streets and not disband the movement, not demobilize, keep the mobilization going so that there is a pressure. Inside there was pressure. Finally, student representatives were called. Finally, the whole negotiation of a long listing with which the final shape of the interim government has come about, shows that there are actually forces in Bangladesh's civil society at large which have taken that initiative to see that it doesn't get derailed, that it doesn't become an army takeover. Simply, if the army had its way, the first meeting it had, it would have been a replication with Jamaat, BNP, army, a little bit of people from here and there, maybe one or two civil society organizations were called civil liberties organization. But this shape has come about because there is a very important intervention from the larger intelligentsia in Bangladesh. And I think that is the crucial thing. What BNP wanted was an immediate election, because then they would win, because there's no other force. I think the important thing that it has been delayed and that there is now a demand also for a constituent assembly and things, but also various other steps in which the restructuring can take place. I think the crucial thing, which I heard only, I have no confirmation of it, that the movement against discrimination is planning to float a political outfit, because actually if the elections have to happen, and if the elections will ultimately become another BNP Awami League election, then there is no hope. So it has to happen with a third force emerging, which is there. Only it has to constitute itself as such. And I think I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that there is actually a push in that direction. So everything else then will work out if you have that force in place.
Yeah, Zakaria, very shortly.
And Mr. Aditya is right. We have been working on this reforming Bangladesh for quite a long time, and our civil society has very rich traditions of the discussion that how we should reform the state. And I think I have my own share also, because I have been part of this, some of the constitutional reforms initiatives. Personally, from our initiatives point of view, I would like to point out, like, just if 3 or 4 key reforms that I would like to see in the government, and we are trying to convince the government. One is that we need a new social contract. The existing constitution, which is like our de facto now, the social contract is completely broken up, has not uh, provided what the countries need, one country needs, both in terms of our social values, our cultural values, our education, and etc. So everyone appreciate that we need a step change, not a change. So it must start from a new social contract, a new agreement, which is a new constitution. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that after we frame the constitution, we have to work on our democratic institutions. Like all major democratic institutions have been totally personalized, been dysfunctional, corrupt. How we can make them impersonal, at least a semblance of impersonality, how we can make them functional so that they serve the people, not the master. So that's the second set of reform. All these democratic institutions, from the election commissions to the anti-corruption commissions to the human rights commission, all the statutory and constitutional bodies, this set of institutions, which we call the vertical accountability mechanisms, right? Starting from parliament, the judiciary, and all this, the we within the government that can hold the executive accountable in one form or the other. And then we also lost credibility in the sorry, that was the horizontal accountability plane mechanism. But we also lost credibility in the vertical accountability mechanism, which is the accountability mechanism outside the government, which is supposed to keep the pressure on the system from outside the government, like the media, the civil society. And you know, our media has been like, it became a propaganda tool for the regime. 99% of the media ownership was forcibly occupied or usurped by the regime affiliated people. So we have to clean that. We have to make a new rules of the game. What will be the role of the media in a new democratic society? How they can hold the power accountable, not not like a peace power. And then a third set of reforms, I think the laws and I mean, both in terms of its content and its application. And this is a sad reality for all the countries in South Asia, that we inherit this British colonial law. The colonial law was made to serve the purpose of the master, and the people are the subject. They were not treated as equal citizens. These are not a charter for citizens. These are all these laws, major laws, most of these laws. I mean, can and you believe all the South Asian countries still use the official Secrecy Acts, like 200 years old act, almost like 150 years old act. So these laws have no place in a democratic society. We have to revise major laws and completely get rid of these colonial remnants. And then how you apply the laws. Then again, the colonial mindset, the police, all the judicial officials, the law enforcement officers, their mindset, because it born out of the colonial practices, that you have to subdue people, you have to control people, right? That's where they have been designed, the institutional architecture of it. Now the whole gamut of reforms in terms of how you perceive your role in the society, in a democratic society. I think these are the very few fundamental things that we need to address. And then finally, on the front of democracy, I know and we speak about it even in USA on outside. It has many problems, but it is the least bad options, right? So we need to fix the way the representative democracy works, and we have to start with the campaign financing, so that the people retain the process does not feed the elites. The elites cannot hijack the proper process, right? It is the same for all the democracies. The established consolidated the democracies to transitional democracy. I think we can do a great service if you can start. The people will take charge of the campaign finance and the electoral rules and etc. Those are more details. I'm not going to go into that details.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. Officially, we have crossed our time, but I mean, if you agree, we can take maybe 2 questions from the audience, if we have time.
Yes, sure,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
can take more if people would like to ask.
Okay, let's start with 2. I can see Avanti Harun.
Right. Okay, thank you so much for this very thought-provoking discussion. I really enjoyed from both of you, Professor Nigam and Dr. Zakaria. Yeah, you have covered a lot of issues. So I'm just, it's not a question exactly, but I'd like to make my point with Dr. Zakaria. At some point, you said that no one is targeting the Hindus in Bangladesh. No one is having the targeting attack on Hindu minorities and the temples. I would like to elaborate this point a little bit. That first of all, we need to agree that people are communal in Bangladesh, in South Asia. We have the communalist mentality in many aspects. But
Not people, some people.
Okay, let me clarify. The communalist sentiment doesn't always lead to the extremism always. But when we talk about the Hindus or other communities, we use the terms like Malaun or others in general discussions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are willing to attack. They are willing to have hatred. So there are many layers of communalism. As you are talking about the theoretical discussions, maybe we can go to Ginadas or Gyanendra Pandey and others, but we can see that there are many, many layers. In the surface there are, but at the same time, these are the same people who also help them, support them, have friendships. But whenever they come to talk about, cricket, saying, oh, you are supporting India? No, that is how many people address the Hindus or sometimes. So, but not necessarily that lead them to attack the temples or anything. I fully agree. So, and also a very large part of this anti-Hindu sentiment comes from anti-India feeling, very much regarding that there is a very widespread notion of anti-India feeling, because India is a dominating, for them it's a big nation surrounding us and there are many political issues. So that is also generated by that. So the controversies is there. Of course, there are many controversies in the field level among the people. And equally, there is also anti-Islam sentiment among the so-called liberals and the elites. That whenever they see that, oh, these people are wearing any Islamic dress or whoever they find as studying the madrasa, they're often labeled as Jamaat Islami people. They're often labeled as, oh, these are extremists, these are jungis. So equally, it's a little bit, there are minor in number, but they are very vocal. That is the game has been used by Sheikh Hasina for long. This polarization she allowed to happen, the extreme polarization. So I'm just trying to add that by this movement, by this uprising, we see a new possibility. We saw the madrasa students are doing graffiti. They joined the movement while the English medium students also joined that. So there's a new possibility that I'm not saying that is abolished, but that is creating the possibility of more amalgamation in future. That is the most positivist outcome that I see. That is the most positive outcome I could see. That in my area, I see that the girls the young girls, the madrasa students, the English medium students, they all are joining together, working, controlling the traffic signals. So that is the most positive outcome. But before we go into the treatment of the disease or illness, we need to identify what are the diseases. So I would like to ask all of you to see that how these polarizations have been taking place in Bangladesh for long. Oh, madrasas are extremist. Oh, Hindus are pro-Indian. All these are there. But now we are moving towards a new future, possibly, or maybe new barriers are going to be made. Thank you. That was my point.
Yeah,
Thank you
sure.
for the question.
Yeah,
Zakir bhai,
I
before addressing the question, should we take another question and then you can address maybe combining?
I'll take 1 minute or less. I think because it's a statement, it's not a question per se. Just to factually correct that. Actually, I didn't say that there was no attacks. I categorically say there are 3 kinds of attacks that are happening. What I said is that these are random attacks. These are not systematic, part of systematic targeting. So there is a huge difference between systematically targeting a group of people and organized way. But I think that's what my argument is. And the second is that what you mentioned about. So sorry, I forgot it. I'll come back to you when I.
Okay. Is there any other question? Okay. If not, maybe we can end the discussion today as we are already out of time. So thank you so much, Dr. Aditya and Zakaria bhai, for taking your time to join us. And also, I would like to thank all the audiences who joins us today. And all at the last that I would like to invite Anushka, if you have any last things to say, then we can officially end.
Before Anushka says something to Abavanti's point statement, I'd like to summarize this is because she also, I mean, these are really valid and interesting points, and we can discuss this for the whole session. In my view, if you ask me that this new amalgamation, as you mentioned, the new opportunity for working together, bridging the gaps across the different section of the social society, is a way forward, can be a way forward for Bangladesh. To what extent that will happen, we'll have to wait and see. But I remember the point that I was trying to make. Very few people, I would say less than 1 or 2% of people, even within the fundamentalist or really religious groups, the people who carry this hatred that transpire into incitement of violence or even violence itself is extremely fringe. My personal experience of interacting with people, I visited almost like every corner of the country when I was working for BRAC. I lived there. I of course, I cannot authoritatively say that I have all the data and etc. But from my own life experiences, and also if you study the attacks, this is a very insignificant minority of people who attack minority, who abuse this window of opportunity. And we have to constantly work, we have to constantly fight against this menace. And one of the way that we can address this is through functioning institutions, the impersonal institutions. If institutions can treat its citizens, regardless of the color, creed, or race, that's one way you can get the redress. But unfortunately, Sheikh Hasina played this a minority card. But the overwhelming majority of the attacks against minority during her tenure was carried out by her own party gang. And worse is that none of that attacks have happened in last 10 years, were properly investigated, properly prosecuted. So that's why we have to be very careful, because these people try to abuse the rights of the minority to their political benefits, and to them it's just the ping pong, because it serves BJP, it serves Awami League, because that's where their bread and butter.
Okay, thank you. So thank you all for your time and participation. I would also like to extend a special thanks to Dr. Aditya Nigam and Sultan Muhammad Sakaria for the fruitful discussion, as well as to my friend Sunayat for moderating the discussion. So as we look forward to more discussions like this in the future, we will now conclude, and all of you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Junaid. Thank
Bye.
you, Colombo Institute. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.